Hello everyone, welcome to your team session. So I'm just going to wait another couple of minutes and then we will kick off. I just want to confirm that everyone can hear me and everyone can see my screen. And you should find that I'm hoping everyone can hear me. And in the Skype window you should find there's a little chat box which I'll just send everyone a quick smiley face. And we'll wait 2 minutes and then we will kick off. Okay, so welcome to your Office 365's team session. My name's Iain Kendrick. For the next about half an hour, 45 minutes, I'm going to be taking you on a very kind of high level overview of Teams. Because of what Teams is, we're not going to go into vast amounts of detail into all of the functionality, just because that's in the time space that we've got available. It would be doing a bit of a kind of injustice to Teams. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you essentially just a kind of end-to-end overview of what Teams does and how your business can utilize it. And essentially, Teams is Microsoft's replacement for Skype for Business and Link. So over the kind of next kind of really kind of 18 to 24 months, you're going to see Microsoft start pushing you guys to update and change to Teams. Now this is a change that Mirus is quite literally just gone through, so I've been doing all the training internally with all of the staff in the business. So as we're going through, if anyone's got any questions, feel free just to kind of drop an instant message and I'll answer it as when we come to a kind of natural point. So let's kick off. So I hope everyone can hear me. If you can't, please let me know. Although if you can't hear me, you wouldn't be able to reply to me because you wouldn't have heard that. But if everyone can just kind of just send me a quick message on the IM and we'll kick off. So during the session today, we're going to cover off two key things. We're going to be looking at the basics of Teams, and then we're going to look at actually the kind of fundamentals of Teams and what Teams is. Because Microsoft have caused a bit of a headache for a lot of businesses where they've had this transitional period really over since about 2015, where they deployed Link 2013 back in the day. They then told everyone, oh no, Link's going to be end of life and we're going to move you over to Skype for Business. And now all of a sudden Teams has come in. So that transitional period between Skype for Business and Teams has really only been about 18 months. And a lot of businesses are kind of sitting there going, well, I've just invested all this time and money getting my staff trained on Skype for Business. What's this Teams malarkey? What's it going to do? And all of that kind of good stuff. And Microsoft they're really just starting now to kind of push what Teams is. And again, this is one of the questions that we internally within Mirus were asking, is why do we want to change and invest all the time and effort into making that transition into Teams when we've already kind of embedded Skype for Business? So that's really what we're going to be kind of looking at. And when you're looking at Teams, the easiest way of looking at it is splitting it down into two key areas. And the first of those areas looks at essentially the kind of communication functions within Teams. So for those of you that are familiar with Skype for Business and Link, these share an awful lot of similarities. And if you would have asked me, say for instance 6 to 12 months ago, if you should even look at Teams, I would have told you no, because Skype for Business had a lot more functionality, it was a lot more stable, it was generally just a better product. And over the past 12 months, Teams has really come on to the point where it's now starting to become a viable option to migrate from Skype for Business onto the Teams platform. And again, Teams comes with all Office 365 subscriptions. I think it's E3 and above. But what it does is its kind of key purpose is to kind of enable Microsoft's kind of collaboration features, and it relies heavily on the use of the cloud, so stuff like OneDrive, SharePoint. But what it does is it helps pull everything together. So basic things that that Teams can do. So the first one is obviously you can do your instant message, and it works in exactly the same way as it does in Skype for Business. And I'm not going to spend, when we're looking at Teams itself, a vast amount of time looking at these core features, predominantly because they're very commonplace, but we will touch on them very briefly. So again, out of the box features, you get the fact that you can send IMs, you can do voice calls, so you can do teams to teams, you can do video calls as well, and then you've also got the ability to be able to utilize Teams if you pay, I think it's about between kind of like £7 to kind of £12 a month. You can actually get Teams to completely to replace your kind of hardware, your telephony hardware. Say for instance, you've got standard landlines and all of that kind of nice stuff. You can actually utilize Teams to completely replace that functionality, and it's designed to kind of centralize everything onto your laptop via a soft client, which we're going to go in and have a look at now. So they're the core functions, and again, like I said, I'm not going to spend an awful lot of time covering these. We'll just kind of touch on them. The big thing that makes Teams stand out from Skype for Business, and is the bit that most people have trouble getting their head around, is what is the Teams bit and the functionality part. And I always kind of explain it as it is essentially just like having a virtual office space that you can actually kind of collaborate with your colleagues. And unlike Skype for Business, where you can have meetings which are temporary, such as this one, the meeting rooms within Teams are persistent, and they're a really good way of being able to have all of your information around a particular team. Say, for instance, if you've got a team which are deploying Teams, you could have a team for Teams, and you can have all of that information in essentially one room. And you can pull up stuff like virtual whiteboards. You can do all kinds of stuff which we're going to look at, and this is going to be where we're going to concentrate the most, predominantly because this is the part that most people have the trouble getting their heads around. So it's very much a case of split it into two halves. You've got the communication side, where you can do all of the stuff we just talked about, and then you've got the team side, which has all the benefits of that communication stuff, but you also get your own kind of permanent meeting space. So it's a very, very flexible platform. So I'm just going to go and close out my PowerPoint, and I'm just going to go and open up Teams. So Teams is available through various platforms. It's got a web version, so if I go and open up my page, this is the web version of Teams. As you can see, it looks pretty much exactly the same, and it has about 95% of the functionality that the desktop app actually has. So even if you're out and about and you don't have access to your PC with an Office 365 subscription, you can actually just log into the portal and utilize the 365 Teams experience via the web browser. I think it has to be HTML5 compatible, which most browsers are these days. So quick overview of Teams. So unlike Skype for Business, where generally you will have your options at the top of the screen, Teams has everything laid down the left hand side. So the first one here is activity, and this is basically treat it like your Facebook wall. So this will essentially display all of the information that involves you. So if anyone tags you in a post, if someone kind of @s you or anything along those lines within a message or within a team, this feed will essentially just populate with all of that content. So as you can see here, I'm quite lonely. I've got a voicemail from 44, which was over the last kind of couple of weeks. But here, as you start to use Teams more proactively, what you'll find is this will essentially just kind of gives you a quick notification. Next, you've then got your chat function. So if I come in here, for instance, here's a list of all of my contacts, and that's controlled between these two menus over here. And one of the big things about Teams is, as I said, it's got all of that kind of standard functionality. So if I come down here and I scroll through my list, here's a list of suggested people that potentially I want to contact, and here's a list of all of my recent conversations. So for instance, if I go and open up the conversation that I had with Sarah, here for instance, as you can see, it's just a really quick overview of a conversation that I had with her. And again, same with Liam, here's some stuff that Lynn's asked me to do. So it's a very, very quick and easy way of being able to access all of your information. Historically on Skype for Business, these conversations, once you've kind of had them and you click close, they seem to kind of disappear into the ether. Whereas on Teams, the chats are persistent. So if I've had a conversation with Laura James, and I need to go, and I can't remember where we're going to meet for lunch, here, as you can see, I've got the message which was sent all the way back on the 15th of March. And again, she sent me a GIF with some cats playing the piano, but I've got all of that history which sits in that chat box. So that's one of the key differences between Skype Instant Message and Teams Instant Message. Obviously, top right hand corner, I've got my stuff like I can video call, voice call, I can share content such as my screen, and I can also add additional people to the conversation. But again, I'm not going to spend too much time kind of covering those off. When you're talking to people, you can also add external contacts. And it's very much a case of, if I wanted to add an external person, I could go to new chat. I could just go in and type in someone's email address. So here, for instance, I could add Iain at BGF, whatever the case may be. And what that would do is it would actually send a message out to that individual's inbox, and it would ask them if they wanted to join me on a conversation. And it's all done through the web browser, so they don't have to have Teams installed locally on their machine. So it means you can communicate very effectively with external parties as well as internal parties. But again, if they do have Teams on their actual machine, it kind of creates like a mini connection between you and external parties. From a chat perspective, that really is kind of the kind of key difference. You've got a couple of options down here. So for instance, you can mess around with the fonts, you can add emojis, which seems to be the current trend. You can also add stuff like GIFs. So I can come down here, open up my GIF menu, there it is, and I can send Laura a quick GIF. But one of the big things about that Microsoft are trying to do with Teams, they're trying to make it a lot more social and informal in many ways. So again, when you're looking at the use of Teams, do take that on board. It's not designed to be as formal as email, for instance. So that's the kind of IM function. You might notice you've got some tabs at the top here. We're going to come back to these when we look at Teams themselves. So your chats are basically just as I said, just a list of all of the individuals that you work with, and what will happen is this list of suggested contacts are people that I work with in my business. And what happens is Teams will actually analyze who I send emails to, who I contact and share files with, and it will look at all of that information that I'm generating, and it will actually start to kind of build this suggested list based on my usage of Office 365. So it's very clever. You've got some quite cool AI powered functionality which is going on in the background. Adding contacts, again, here I've got my contacts list, and this works very similarly to a address book on your iPhone or on your Android device. So for instance, it will also sync with your contacts in Outlook, so you can pull those individuals into Teams if need be. To search for a contact is really simple. All I'd need to do is click up here, type in the name of the person I want to find. So in here I'm going to type in Tom, and what it's done is it's typed in Paul Tomlinson and Tom Williams. If I wanted to chat to one of those individuals, I can just click on their name, and away we go. So it's very, very easy to understand, and there's not really kind of a lot more that you can do with the IM function. So it's very similar to what you got in Skype for Business. So that's the chat tab. Now, what I'll do is at the end of the session, I'll send across a link directly to the Microsoft support site for Teams, which has loads and loads of material on there and goes into this in a lot more detail. So that's chat. We're going to come back to Teams. You've then got your calendar, and this basically is syncs with your Outlook calendar. And if I wanted to create a Teams meeting, I can just come in, I can click on schedule meeting, I can give it a title, I can set a location if need be, and I can then set the date and time as you would do in Outlook. Now, one of the nice things about this is what it'll do is when I click on schedule, just like the meeting invite that supports this meeting, what it will do is it will have essentially, if I go into my meeting invite, it will generate something that looks pretty much exactly the same as this. So here it will, apart from instead of saying join Skype meeting, it will say join Teams meeting, but it will basically come up with all of this information related to that call. So it will give you a temporary meeting password, it will give you a temporary PIN number. I can just then add my contacts, and anyone who then has access to that invite can then join that meeting. And it works in a very similar way to the call that we're looking at today. So I don't want to, let's just minimize that. So that's calendar. And again, I'm not going to go into vast amounts of details on that section. Next, we then have calls. So this bit's very, very clever. So this will actually let me dial external mobile numbers, landline numbers, pretty much anyone I like, barring international calls, directly from my computer. So if I was to come in here and type in a mobile telephone number, I have no idea what this is, I'm just making it up. If I was to dial that number and click on call, Teams would actually ring through for that number. So it means that I don't actually need an office phone. I can do all of my communication directly through Teams itself. Again, this is an add-on from the basic Teams functionality, but it does mean that if you're looking at replacing your phone network, you can essentially look to kind of centralize everything within Teams itself. And you've got an extra couple of options. So you've got you can view all of the files that you've created, and I can click on the ellipses, and I've got access to stuff like OneNote Planner, but we're going to come back to those in a second. So when it comes to the basics, stuff like chat, calendar, and calls are the easiest parts to get your head around with. That's the part where you go through and you do your standard communication in a very similar way to Skype for Business. The bit that makes the big impact to Teams is the Teams function itself. So this is a team that I've created. So obviously Team Awesome, and underneath Team Awesome I then have 3 channels. And these channels are essentially a general channel. So anyone who has got access to this team can add content and add discussion directly to a persistent chat. So for instance, in this case, I've got a message from Ryan. He said hello, so I can then go through, send a smiley face, and again, it uses the exact same IM functions that the chat function did that we looked at briefly earlier. I get all of those functions at the bottom, so I can change my font, I can add attachments. Again, I can add GIFs, which is most probably the most important one. So I can go and add a GIF. And anyone who is a part of this team and has access to it, and again, you can give internal and external people access to your teams, would be able to see all of this persistent chat. And as you can see, here's all the individuals that have joined the team. And the nice thing is what it does is it keeps everything in one place. And how I've seen some businesses utilize this is what they do is they will have a team set up for each physical team. So for instance, in Mirus, we have our service desk, and within our service desk, we've then got different colored teams who support different clients. So the team might be called service desk, but you might have a channel which is called red team, blue team, orange team, green team, depending on what the content is. So if I wanted to go and have a chat with everyone in Team A, or I've got some important information for them, what I can do is I can just click the relevant channel, I can then enter my information, and I can just type away. And the nice thing about this is because this message is this content is persistent, it means that there's a permanent log of it. So if, for instance, there's an issue with a particular client, or someone's got some really useful information that they want to share about how to solve a problem or something on those lines, they can drop that information directly into the main chat room. And that's essentially what these are. They're just chat channels. When it comes to adding teams and stuff, that's all controlled through this little button just down here. So if I click on that, what it will do is it will give me the option to create a team. I can join a team. So for instance, if an external partner has given me a specific team code, what I can do is I can type that code in, and it would then let me go and join that particular team. And here's the only team we've actually got set up in Mirus, which is all to do with football. So as you can see here, this is a public team, and what I can do is if I click on join, it will take me into that team itself. And I'll then basically have it appear in my drop-down menu over to the left-hand side. So these give your actual physical teams the ability to be able to have areas which they can basically share content around relevant subjects. So for instance, if Team Awesome is doing a Skype for Business, or sorry, a Teams deployment, not Skype for Business, I can come in, I can go add channel, I can create a new channel. Oh, you're not allowed smiley faces. I can give it a little description. And I can automatically make sure that everyone has access to this channel just by clicking on that little button there. So I can just click on add, and that channel will then become accessible to anyone who's a part of my team. So that's essentially the basics of what Teams is. It means that you can have, say for instance, a team for a project team. You can have everything to do with that project team all sitting in one location. So instead of all the communication being sent out via email to loads of different people, everything can be centralized. And one of the cool things is every time you create a team, an email address is also generated. So there is at the moment an email address which is team.awesome@mirus-it.com, and each one of these channels then also gets an email address. So it'd be general.team.awesome@mirus-it. So if I click on that, for instance, I should be able to go through and send myself an email. And again, that email functionality can be disabled and enabled by your administrators. So if I was to go into my Outlook, let's go and pull up my Outlook, and if I just scroll all the way down, here are all of my teams that I've got created. So I've got a team called Team, and each one of these is a dedicated way of being able to basically have all the information which is related to that project sent in. And usually what you do, I think this has been disabled by our administrator, is you could just come in and you'd have an option here which would essentially say add email, and it would then just create an email address for that particular channel or that particular team. So it's a very useful piece of functionality. Now, while you're creating a team, what it also does is it also creates a mini SharePoint site. And it's all done in the background. So once you've created a team, there'll also be a place where that team will also be set up as I said, a mini SharePoint site. So if I then come in and start to add files, so all of these files are accessible by anyone with access to this team here. So here, for instance, I've got a Teams quick start guide. So if I click on that, what it will do is it will open up that quick start guide. And again, I'll send this out to you. This is all freely available directly from Microsoft as well. But what it does is it means all of the files and all the content related to this particular team can all be stored in one location. And again, you can, very simple to upload something, just click on upload, select the file, and then away you go. You can also add cloud storage, so if you've got OneDrive or Dropbox or something on those lines, you can also link directly to specific files. And if I click on open in SharePoint, what this will do is it will go and open up that document library. Oh no, mine won't, because I'm signed in as about 20 different people. But what it will do is it will actually start to give me access to all of that different content. So it's a very, very useful bit of functionality. And again, I think you've got about a terabyte of storage on that Teams file site. So it's very, very useful. And each one of these different channels gets their own file section up here. So for instance, as you can see, if I click into General and I click into Files, here's all my files to do with General. But if I go to A Team and then go to Files, you can't see those files because it's a completely different channel. So you can have different files for different teams. You could also get the ability to be able to add content. So here, unlike Skype for Business, is you can actually start to add apps into Teams itself. So here, for instance, I've got an app which is using the Microsoft Planner plugin. So if I click on here, here's a really basic project map, project plan. So here, for instance, all of the project tasks which are related to this particular channel I can add here, and one of the nice things about it is I can also assign these. So for instance here, Pippa has got a couple of things, so she's got to create a plan. So as she's going through and completing these different stages, everyone within that particular team has access to that project plan. And again, you can have different project plans for the different channels. I've also got the ability to be able to add web pages. So here, for instance, I've got a web page or a tab which is a web page, and it takes you directly to the Teams training site. So if you're doing a web-based project and you need a web login, you could add that login page directly into Teams, so everyone's got access to it instead of sending out an email with a hyperlink. I can also add complete document libraries from SharePoint. So I can come across the document library, and if I go into my Office docs, here is all of the supporting documentation for various projects that I've worked on. But it means that everyone who's got access to this team can view and add to this content. And again, the access controls which are set up in SharePoint are not circumvented. So if only I have access to this document library, you can actually essentially mean that only I can make changes to this and other people can just view the content. Penny's just said, I've recently found that you can also sync Teams SharePoint sites to your computer through OneDrive. Can you do this through OneDrive for those that do sync their SharePoint sites? Yeah, there is an ability within OneDrive when you're in SharePoint that you can just click on a button and it will actually sync that SharePoint site directly into your OneDrive. But this, again, this is a very slightly separate functionality. So to add all of this kind of functionality within the team, you've got this little plus button, and this is essentially the key to utilizing Teams. So if I click on that plus button, here it will give me access to pretty much loads and loads of different applications that I can plug into the team. So if I want to, I can have a team OneNote. I can click on OneNote and it will go through and start to build itself. And in this case, I just want to create a new workbook, and I'm going to call this testing. Let's get rid of that space. I'm just going to click save. So this OneNote notebook now sits within this team. And in essence, anyone who's got access to this team can now add content directly into this OneNote notebook. So it's a very powerful tool. And again, with Teams, it's around playing around with it and working out how it can work for you and your business. I mean, there'll be apps in the tabs which are relevant, which aren't relevant. So, for instance, some Meister Task, I've never used that in my life. Don't have a clue what it is. One of the big things that you find is that Microsoft continuously add to the list of applications which are coming into Teams. One of the big things about Teams is it's constantly under development. So the application that we're looking at today in about 5 or 6 months will most probably look very, very different as Microsoft start to tweak the interface and make it look a lot nicer and easier to use. But Teams is all around collaboration, and it's very much a case of this part of the Teams platform is the section that most people kind of look at and go, well, what am I going to do with it? And I always tell people to treat it like a persistent virtual meeting room. So you can go in, you can put stuff on the wall, which is essentially what this is. This is the equivalent of me going into a meeting room and doodling on a whiteboard. And you've got loads of different ways in which you can interact with Teams itself. So for instance, if you use Asana or anything along those lines, you can plug in that content directly into the team. So when it comes to managing projects and managing in Teams, it's a really useful and very powerful little application. But it's again, this is very much the start of a lot of companies' Teams journeys, and my advice to you is just play around with it. There's no right or wrong way of utilising Teams. It's you can't really break anything. It's quite a robust little platform, and one of the really cool things about this is it's also available on an app which you can download directly onto your iPhone or an Android device, and it gives you about 99% of the functionality. So you can do stuff like voice dialing directly from your phone. Again, if you've bought the relevant package of Microsoft, you can do lots and lots of different bits directly from lots of different from lots of different devices. And that's the way that Microsoft has started to go. So in about the next kind of 10, 15 years, you'll start to find that desktops downloaded to your app, applications that you download to your desktop will start to disappear, and everything will just eventually move into the cloud. But that's a really brief overview of Teams. It's very much a case of play with it, see what works for you, see what doesn't work. If you do start to open Teams up to your wider business, I always advise starting off with a small group and just kind of giving them a quick demo. Look at the training material that Microsoft has got available. And again, feel free to utilize us at Mirus. It's very much a case of we will kind of go through and give people working examples of how they can utilize it and collaborate on the platform itself. But if you work in an environment which is very much home-based or very much kind of separated geographically, Teams gives you that ability to almost have that kind of inter-office experience without actually physically seeing each other. It's a really, really powerful tool, and I really like it. It's one of those things that once you kind of got your head around the changes between Skype for Business and Teams, it starts just to kind of make sense in how you can utilize it. Are there any questions? If you have got any questions, feel free to kind of type them into the IM, and I'll do my best to answer. Hi Andy, I've just seen your message about how do you post to numerous channels. In essence, you really wouldn't want to kind of do that. The main reason being is because in the example that I showed where I had the general channel, that's your kind of overall arching channel which everyone would kind of work from. You then have your sub channels. And again, it's designed so the communication channels are separate. As far as I know, I don't think there's any ability to be able to post multiple kind of. So, for instance, you can pick up a message and kind of copy and paste it in, obviously, but you couldn't kind of do like an all-together post. In fact, let's go through and have a look. No, you can't. You can only post individually. But in the example that we saw where we had the general channel, that's kind of where you'd kind of stick that kind of information. Has anyone else got anything? If there aren't any questions, thank you very much for your time. And if you've got any questions at all, feel free to kind of give Liam or any of the guys in the comms team a quick shout, and what they will do is they will kind of ping your message over to me, and I will help you where I can. But thank you very much for your time, and have a lovely afternoon.